In this video, I'm gonna show you how to draw column grids. I make sure that I'm working on first flow level. I click on Architecture tab and then I click on Grid. You can draw column grids in many different ways. You can draw a straight column grid, you can draw circular, or simply you can use the Pick Lines option. I need to draw a straight grid, so I will use the first option. I make sure that anything I draw has to be inside these 4 elevation symbols, because if I draw something outside these elevations, then they are not gonna be visible in facade views. I click somewhere here and start moving the mouse up. Now notice that the first point that I click will not have a grid bubble, and the second point that I click will have a grid bubble. You can use that as a strategy when placing your column grids, so that you can have bubbles on the desired direction. Now notice that I can draw this grid line in any angle that I want. When I click that second point, there is no requirement that says they have to be perpendicular or parallel. So we can draw them in any angle. So now I press escape button twice or click on modify to come out of that command. Now let's say that that was a mistake and I didn't want to draw this grid in angle. So I select it and press the delete key, or right click and click on delete to remove that grid. I'm gonna go back to the grid command. The shortcut is GR, by the way. Start almost the same general location, but this time I'm gonna be careful and make sure that I'm drawing it perfectly vertical at 90 degrees. And then I will click to place that grid. Now notice that it created the grid bubble as number 2. So it's very important at this point to renumber the grid, cause otherwise you have to come back later and number them all over again. But if you catch it right now, you can renumber it right here, and then the next ones in sequence will number properly. This is because regardless the fact that we deleted the other grid, Revit remembers where we left off and it just picks up from there. So before pressing escape button or clicking on modify, I can rename this grid line. I can type number 1 that I want, or I can even switch to letters if I want to use letters in this direction instead, but I will keep numbers in this direction and type 1 and press enter or click somewhere to confirm it. Because I have not pressed escape button or clicked on modify, so I am still in creating grid line command. I can simply draw more grid lines, but let's use the other options. But before creating my second grid lines, I wanna check my PDF so I can draw it in right distance. As you see, the next grid is drawn 7150 from grid number 1. In this time, I'm gonna show you the pick line option. I can type in 7150 in offset and press enter. Now I can simply click on line and Revit will create the next grid with the offset that I typed in as offset. When I move my mouse near to the grid line, it highlights and an other dashed blue line shows up. This indicates the placement of my new grid line. If I move my mouse to the right, it will create the new grid line to the right. And if I move my mouse to the left, the new grid line will be created to the left. So I move my mouse to the right, and when dashed line appears, I click to draw the next grid to the right. As you can see, we have easily created the second grid using pick line option. I will use the same option and create other grids as well. I created all vertical grid lines, but as you have noticed, grid line number 7 is located outside the elevation. Now I must move my elevation to the right. To move an elevation, first I should select it, make sure that I am in modify tab, and then click on move. The shortcut is MV. I click on it and move it just here. So now it's time to create the horizontal grid lines. Same as before, I can type in the shortcut, which is GR, or click on architecture and then grid. I click somewhere here and make sure I'm drawing perfectly horizontal. I click somewhere here to create the horizontal grid line. So before moving on, I want to renumber this grid line and change them into letters. I simply click on it and type in capital A and then press enter to confirm it. I'm gonna use the pick line option to draw the remaining grid lines. I see my PDF as reference and make sure that grid lines are drawn correctly. I click on modify to come out of that command. So as you have noticed, not only elevation should be moved, but I have to adjust my vertical grid lines as well. So let's move elevation symbol first. I select it and move it a little bit up. To change grid lines, I can select one of them. You may have noticed that a lock icon appears. It shows that this grid is locked with other grid lines. And if I drag it upward or downward, the other grid lines will follow along. So let's move it up. As you see, there is a blue circle. I click on it and drag it above over here and release my mouse. And if I wanted to move only this grid line, I could click on lock icon and unlock it. And then I could drag only this grid line. But I'm gonna undo that. If I want to show bubble on both sides, I select a grid line and click on the little box. To release selection, I simply press escape button or click on modify. I can do the opposite the same way by selecting a grid line, and in this time I click on the check mark to uncheck it. And as you can see, the grid bubble is gone. So now that our grid lines are created, we can easily draw our walls, which is the topic of next video.